I'm sorry, Nancy, but effective immediately your position is being eliminated. That's what the HR ghoul said. No eye contact, just clicking her stupid pen like she was taking attendance at a PDA meeting and not gutting someone's career. Meanwhile, David, my boss of 6 godless years, sat across the table with a smirk like he just farted into a silk napkin and gotten away with it. His tie was crooked, I remember that dumb blue tie with little white sailboats, like he thought he was captaining a yacht instead of torpedoing a 48-year-old woman's livelihood a week before bonuses were paid out. A week. 7 days. The same company where I'd racked up 12-hour days and bled weekends dry like they were wine boxes at my mother's chemo clinic. I opened that bonus spreadsheet. I saw the numbers. I knew I was in for at least 40 grand, money that was already mentally spent on overdue hospital bills and fixing mom's roof before winter crushed it like a beer can. But David, he was restructuring. Restructuring apparently meant axing anyone with a conscience and a salary higher than his favorite intern's monthly bod allowance. I stood up slowly, jaw tight enough to snap my molars into powder. No severance? I asked, my voice polite enough to make me hate myself. Standard package, Charbot chirped like a seagull defending a Cheeto. 3 weeks and a positive reference, assuming no complications. Oh, I wouldn't dream of complicating your little bonus pool orgy, I said, grabbing my bag with fingers that felt like they were made of glass. Now listen, if you're already clutching your coffee mug tighter than your therapist's NDA, do me one tiny favor, hit subscribe. I know, 97% of you are just floating through these stories like ghosts through a Sears appliance aisle. But I'm clawing my way to my first 10,000 subscribers like a possum in a raccoon trap, and every click counts. Let's show corporate karma the algorithms got teeth. Anyway, back to me getting spiritually shanked in a conference room. I didn't cry. Not then. I walked out, shoulders square, through an office full of people suddenly fascinated by spreadsheets and shoelaces. My desk, freshly orphaned, waited like a coffin. I started shoveling my life into a cardboard box, framed photo of mom from when her hair still grew in, 3 mugs, 1 chipped, 1 stained, 1 sarcastic, 12 sticky notes with passwords that no longer mattered. I didn't even look at the papers, just swept years of toil into the box like I was bagging up a crime scene. Elevator ride down felt like being lowered into a grave. It wasn't until I got home, 2 glasses of boxed wine deep, face planted into a microwave burrito, that I even remembered the bottom drawer of that desk. The one I never touched unless the printer jammed or someone stole my favorite pen. That's where I found it, stuffed between an old ergonomic mouse and a half-melted stress ball shaped like the company mascot. My original employment contract. Still in the envelope. Still signed. I unfolded it like a cursed scroll, the legalese slapping me in the face with every line. And there it was, buried on page 6, section 12b, under a paragraph about termination conditions. If employee is terminated without cause, she shall be entitled to 10% of company net quarterly profit in the quarter of termination in lieu of standard bonus and severance. I blinked. Read it again. 10%. Not of my department's bonus, of the company's entire quarterly profit. I laughed so hard I snorted wine into my left nostril and choked on a bean. Because here's the thing, sweetheart, they thought they were screwing me over. But I wrote that clause back in 2016, when the company was still run by people who had souls and believed in rewarding long-term loyalty. It was a protective clause meant for execs, but in those early years, they let me negotiate it in because I'd been the only one to land that billion-dollar safety compliance contract. David never read it. Of course he didn't. He barely reads lunch menus unless someone highlights the chicken parm. And now I had a document that said they owed me not $40,000, not even $100,000. No, darling. They owed me 7 figures. And if they wanted to play dirty, I'd bring a flamethrower to the garden party. Monday morning, I walked into the dingy downtown law office of a man Yelp described as the legal equivalent of a pit bull with rabies. Perfect. The place smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner, which honestly matched my mood. The lawyer, Greg Fisk, was a short, wiry guy with a tie that looked like it lost a fight with a garbage disposal and eyes that hadn't blinked since the Bush administration. He barely said hello, just pointed at the seat across from his desk, which was buried under a mountain of folders, half a tuna sandwich, and what might have been a loaded slingshot. "So," he said, flipping through my contract, "they fired you a week before quarterly bonuses. Without cause?" "That's what they said. Corporate restructuring." I put the phrase in air quotes so hard my fingers cracked. Greg let out a low whistle, the kind that means either "damn, you got a shot" or "this is going to be fun to watch." "This clause," he tapped it with a chewed-up pen, "is ironclad. Clear as glass. 10% of quarterly net profit if terminated without cause." They agreed to this back when the CEO still had a conscience and didn't take leadership cues from Genghis Khan. He grinned. "Then they're screwed." I exhaled for the first time in 48 hours. "But," he added, "and here comes the cold shower, they'll never admit it was without cause. Not a chance. They'll say you were insubordinate, incompetent, whatever they need to dirty the water." My stomach turned. I could already hear David's smug voice. Nancy had been difficult for months. Morale issues. Failure to meet strategic alignment. Corporate lingo for, she didn't let me take credit for her team's work. "They'll fabricate something," I said. "Yep. Probably already are," Greg replied. "They'll dig up emails, twist them, claim you missed deadlines or alienated clients. Expect forged performance reviews. Maybe even warnings you never saw." I clenched my fists. "So what now?" "We go proactive," he said, leaning in. "You build a paper trail against them. Start with your performance. Pull emails from leadership praising your work. Client feedback. Awards. Anything that proves you were an asset. Make it impossible to claim you were dead weight." I nodded, heart thumping. "And the motive?" "The money," Greg said, eyes gleaming. "They canned you to boost the executive bonus pool. It's a pattern. Find proof this isn't just about you, that others got the axe right before payout. That's your leverage." I left that office less drunk on revenge and more like a surgeon prepping for war. Gone was the chaos rage from Friday night. This was something colder. More focused. If they were going to lie, I'd catch them in it. Step 1 was clear. I needed someone still inside. Someone loyal. Someone pissed. And I knew just the person. Maria chose the back booth of a tie joint we used to hit on Fridays, when deadlines felt like death sentences and pad CU was the only therapy our budgets allowed. She was already there when I walked in, clutching her water glass like it had secrets. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, but it wasn't joy. It was gasoline waiting for a match. "They told us you left voluntarily," she hissed before I could sit down. "Voluntarily? Like you just got bored and walked out a week before bonus season." Nobody bought it. David's PR machine still running hot. "I see," I said, sliding into the booth. "I assume he's moved into your office already?" "Ha. Moved in, redecorated, and probably installed one of those Keurig pods shaped like his own ego." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "He thinks this is over. That I'm just going to disappear quietly into the LinkedIn graveyard with a taking time to explore new opportunities post." Maria leaned in, lowering her voice. "You're not. Not even close." She exhaled like she'd been waiting for permission to be angry. "Good. Because I've got something." David's been strutting around, talking about how lean and mean the exec team's going to look on paper. how much fat he cut before reporting Q3 earnings to the board. That fat being me. 2 project managers. 1 in HR. And Gerald from compliance. I raised an eyebrow. Gerald? That man alphabetized his post-its. I know. They blindsided him too. No warnings. Just thanks for your years of service. Here's your dignity in a manila envelope. I leaned back. So they were cleaning house. Not cleaning, scrubbing the books. Right before bonuses. And Nancy, there's more. Her eyes darted around the restaurant, then back to me. Remember the 40s deal? That huge RFP we spent weeks prepping? The one I basically lived on protein bars and dry shampoo for? That's the one. We landed it. I blinked. No one announced it. Exactly. Because it's not public yet. But David's already counting it in Q3 projections. It's massive. And the profit margin? Obscene. It's going to spike the quarterly numbers so hard the CFO nearly fainted during the call. Your team closed that deal the day after you were out. Bile rose in my throat. So they cut me right after. I secured the windfall that's going to fund their bonuses, unannounced deal, inflated earnings, reduced overhead, textbook greed. Maria nodded. You weren't a threat. You were a budget line they could erase. I stared into my glass of water, seeing not my reflection but a ledger sheet, my name in red, profits in black, and David's slimy signature stamped over the whole damn thing. You get me proof? I asked. Emails, meeting notes, internal chatter. She nodded again, more somber this time. I'll be careful. But yeah, I'll forward what I can from a personal account and only to you. I don't want you getting burned. She smirked. Please. I've survived 3 reorgs and a team-building ropes course with David. I know how to sneak. We paid in cash and left separately. I walked back to my car with something I hadn't felt since the layoff, purpose. My hands didn't shake as I dialed Greg's number and told him it was go time. He sent the letter within the hour, certified mail, legal tone, 1 paragraph that changed everything. Per Section 12B of Miss Laven's employment contract, we are formally requesting the payment of 10% of your company's net quarterly profit due to her termination without cause. The company had been put on the clock, and David had no idea the grenade I just rolled under his mahogany desk. The response came 3 days later, printed on thick smug letterhead from some overpriced law firm with a name that sounded like a Yale alumni list, Grayson Felder, and I could practically smell the cologne wafting off the envelope before I opened it. Out to and billable hours, Greg read the letter aloud while I paced his office like a bloodhound in a meat locker. Miss Laven's employment was terminated for cause, in accordance with company policy and supported by a documented history of performance concerns. Keep going, I growled. They cite repeated insubordination, pattern of unprofessional conduct, and failure to meet strategic objectives, he said. Attached, 3 written warnings, 2 performance improvement plans, and a final negative review. All signed by David. I stopped pacing. Greg nodded calmly like he'd seen this exact play before. You've never seen any of these? Not one. If I had, I'd have used them as kindling for the passive-aggressive scented candle David gave me last Christmas. He slid the stack across the desk. I picked up the first document, dated June 14th. It claimed I'd openly challenged David during a team meeting, called his strategy rudderless, and publicly undermined his leadership. Only thing I remembered from that day was buying the whole team donuts because we hit a deliverable 2 weeks early. I still had the receipt in my inbox. And I sure as hell didn't remember signing this little gem, because I hadn't. Not one of the documents had my signature. Just David's greasy scroll at the bottom and some poor attempt at formatting that looked like it was cobbled together in a hurry by an intern who'd never used a tab key. Greg tapped the corner of the printout. They're setting the stage. If they can prove you were fired for cause, the clause is dead. You get nothing. Except defamed, blacklisted, and broke. Exactly. That's the game now. I stared at the documents, fingers curling into fists. They're lying. They're forging official warnings. This isn't just sleazy, it's illegal. Greg leaned back in his chair. Prove it. The words hit like a slap, not because he was being cruel but because he was right. I could shout from rooftops all day long that I'd never seen these documents, but unless I had proof they were created after the fact, it was just noise. He said, she said. And I'd get buried under their legal avalanche. Then I remembered something critical. Something stupid. David never wrote his own performance reviews, I said slowly. He didn't even know how. He'd email the template to his admin and tell her to fill it in with something that sounds like leadership. Greg raised an eyebrow. You think the admin wrote these? No, I said. But if he did, he used his computer, which means there's metadata. I pulled out my phone and started typing a message to Maria. It was time to go deeper. These files weren't just forgeries, they were digital footprints waiting to betray the hand that made them. I needed her to get the original files. Not the PDFs. Not the printouts. The actual Word docs. If she can get them off the shared drive or his laptop, they'll have timestamps. And if those timestamps are after your termination date, Greg said with a grin, we've got them by the throat. My blood boiled under the surface like a storm surge, calm above, lethal underneath. They thought I'd roll over. They thought they could rewrite history and bulldoze my name into the mud. But David made one fatal mistake. He underestimated the one person who kept receipts for everything. I wasn't just coming for my money anymore. I was coming for their reputation. And I was bringing fire. Maria's text came in just after midnight like a telegram from the resistance. God, you're going to love this. I sat up in bed, heart hammering, the blue light from my phone glowing like a secret. I'd almost drifted off, lulled by late-night infomercials and a microwaved wine spritzer, but now adrenaline surged through me like rocket fuel. Attached were 4 files, original Word docs, not PDFs. She'd found them buried in a shared drive folder David thought was cleverly named exec_private 1. Apparently, the man who couldn't figure out how to mute himself on Zoom also thought adding a number at the end of a folder name made it hacker-proof. I forwarded them to Greg, then opened the first one on my laptop. Top of the screen, date created, October 4th, 10:14 a.m. I was fired October 3rd. They forged the warnings after I was already out the door, every single one. I laughed, loud, unhinged, like a woman who just found a diamond ring in a bag of dog poop. Not elegant, but goddamn satisfying. The neighbors probably thought I was drunk or hexing someone. Greg called 3 minutes later, sounding like a kid on Christmas Eve with a flamethrower. This is it, he said, voice breathless. This is your smoking gun. There's no spinning this. If we show this to a judge, or even hint we might, they'll cave so fast it'll leave scorch marks. I opened the next message from Maria. This one had a spreadsheet, preliminary Q3 earnings forecast. It was titled internal use only. It listed every major contract signed that quarter, including the still unannounced 40s deal, my team's deal. Bottom line, $38.6 million net profit projected. I stared at the number, chest tightening. Then I did the math. 10%, $3.86 million. That wasn't a bonus, that was a lottery ticket. That was Mom's medical debt incinerated. That was buying back every hour I'd ever spent biting my tongue in a meeting while David mispronounced synergy. I stared at the figure, stunned, while Greg kept talking in my ear about strategic next moves and courtroom leverage and settlement probabilities. But all I could think about was how badly they'd screwed up. They could have fired me clean. Could have just eaten the payout and moved on. But no. They got greedy. They lied. And now they'd handed me the rope to hang them with. This wasn't about clawing back my dignity anymore, I already had that. This was about putting a leash on their smugness. About making sure no one else got gutted just to pad and exec's Christmas stock options. I told Greg to hold off on any more letters. Not yet, I said. We don't just hit them with this. He was quiet for a beat. What do we do? We set the table, I said. We make them think they still have the upper hand. Let them feel safe. Then we flip it over. I was done playing defense. Now I was laying the trap. The envelope showed up 2 days later, hand-delivered by a courier who looked like he'd rather be delivering subpoenas. Didn't even need to open it to know what it was. The timing reeked of panic sweat and deodorized desperation. Inside, a 5-page offer written in the kind of sanitized legalese that tries really hard to sound generous while also trying not to choke on its own cowardice. A one-time payout of $150,000. That was their idea of mercy. A hush-money pittance dressed up as magnanimity. It didn't even come close to the bonus I'd already earned, let alone the contract clause. No mention of wrongdoing. No admission of fault. Just a line about the interests of closure and goodwill. Greg scanned it and smirked, like someone watching a toddler try to bluff at poker. They're scared. They know we've got something. They just don't know how much. Good, I said. Let's keep it that way. Then, like fate had decided to send in the cavalry, I got an email from Frank Eldridge. Now Frank wasn't the type to make waves, and he still worked at the company. He was the quiet guy in finance who always had a spreadsheet open and a mug that said I excel at numbers. The only time I ever saw him raise his voice was when someone moved the shared printer without telling him. So when I read his message, short, clipped, and full of barely contained rage, I knew something was deeply rotten. Heard what happened. Got some things you might want to see. I was let go after raising questions about Q3 earnings adjustments. They're hiding something. Let me know if you're willing to talk. We met at a diner off the highway, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and waitresses who call everyone Han. Frank looked like hell. Eyes sunken. Tie askew. Fingers twitching against his coffee mug like they were still typing invisible numbers. They fired me 3 days after I flagged the 40s accounting entries, he said. Revenue recognition was all wrong. Deferred income was being dumped into Q3 to make it look like an immediate spike, for the bonuses. He nodded grimly. I tried to escalate. Got shut down. Then called into HR for a confidential review. 2 days later, I was out restructuring. He made air quotes so sharp they could slice bread. Then he pulled a flash drive from his pocket. These are the original projections I submitted before the CFO ordered revisions. I kept copies. Backed everything up to my cloud before they revoked access. I took the drive with trembling hands. This wasn't just a witness, this was corroboration. A second voice from the inside confirming everything I suspected and more. Frank could testify to the financial manipulation, the timing of the firing, the direct orders from the top to fudge the numbers. It wasn't just about me anymore. It never had been. David and his cronies weren't just greedy, they were dirty. I emailed Greg the files that night. This changes the calculus, he said after scanning the data. This isn't a lawsuit anymore. This is a nuke. If we go public, it could trigger an SEC review. The CEO won't let that happen. Not over David. Then let's make him choose, I said. We drafted a new plan. No slow bleed. No courtroom slog. Just one sharp surgical strike. A meeting. One room. David, the CEO, their legal team, and us. Greg called it a negotiation. I called it the slaughterhouse. Because we weren't asking for justice anymore. We were coming to collect. The conference room had the sterile, antiseptic chill of a surgical suite. The kind of place designed to make emotions feel out of place and humans forget they had spines. Polished glass table. Bottled water lined up like bullets. And 4 leather chairs on each side that looked far more comfortable than the situation deserved. I sat across from David. He wouldn't look at me, not directly anyway. He kept adjusting his cuff links, fidgeting with his pen, checking his phone like the next notification might bail him out of the trap he'd walked into, wearing a $900 blazer and the flop sweat of a man whose empire was about to implode. Next to him sat the CEO, Reynolds. Human iceberg in a 3-piece suit. The kind of man who never yelled but made entire departments vanish with a single memo. Greg sat beside me, calm and casual like this was just a Tuesday brunch. No tie. Sleeves rolled. A yellow legal pad filled with bullet points that would ruin careers. Let's begin, Greg said, sliding a flash drive across the table. The company's attorney, a woman named Janine with the energy of a disappointed ex-wife, plugged it into her laptop. A large screen behind her flickered to life. First item, Greg said, voice smooth. Performance documentation. 3 warnings. 1 performance improvement plan. 1 final review. All dated before my client's termination. All submitted by your team as justification for firing her for cause. David leaned back, smug, returning like a rash. As they should be. She was insubordinate. Repeatedly challenged my leadership. Ask anyone. Greg raised a hand. We don't need testimonies. We have timestamps. He clicked a remote and the screen displayed a Word document's metadata panel. Date created, October 4th, 10:14 a.m. Ms. Lavin was terminated on October 3rd. This document didn't exist until after she was fired. And it's not just one. He clicked again. Date created, October 4th, 10:19 a.m. Another. October 4th. And another. All created within a 45-minute span the morning after termination. All backdated. All submitted as justification. Janine shifted in her seat. Reynolds narrowed his eyes, glancing sideways at David, who now looked like he was seriously regretting that 3rd espresso. Greg continued, flipping to a new slide. Second item. Sworn affidavit from Mr. Frank Eldridge. Former senior finance analyst. Fired 3 weeks ago after raising concerns about the revenue recognition strategy used for the Fortis account. Reynolds' jaw twitched. This affidavit includes copies of the original Q3 projections and emails from your CFO ordering those projections be revised to reflect revenue in Q3 instead of Q4. Conveniently boosting profit just before bonus calculations. Also right before Ms. Lavin's firing. Greg leaned back, hands clasped. So let's summarize. My client secured a multi-million-dollar deal that inflated your quarterly profit. Then she was fired without cause. Then documents were forged to justify that firing. Then another employee was fired for questioning the very math used to hide this maneuver. Do you want to continue? Janine opened her mouth. Closed it. Then turned to Reynolds. David, he looked like he wanted to crawl inside his iPad. Reynolds stared at the screen for a long time. Then he turned his head slowly toward David. You told me this was handled. David swallowed. It was. I thought. Look, no one was supposed to get out. Reynolds said, what? I said get out of this room. Janine looked like she wanted to vanish with him but stayed seated. David stood, stammering, then scrambled for the door. He knocked over his chair on the way out. The silence he left behind was delicious. Reynolds turned to me. "Miss Lavin, may I speak with you privately?" Greg gave me a sidelong glance. I nodded. Janine started to protest, but Reynolds cut her off with a hand wave. "Just us." The room emptied like someone had pulled the plug on an aquarium. Just me and the CEO. Just predator and predator. The war was over. Now it was time to name the price of peace. Reynolds waited until the door clicked shut behind Janine before speaking. Didn't bother with small talk. No apology. No faux empathy. Not even a throat clear to soften the blow. Just corporate calculus with a pulse. "You're not here to burn the building down," he said. "You're here to get paid." I stared at him for a long second. Then nodded once. "Correct." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. Thinner than I expected, but deadly in its precision. He slid it across the table like it was a menu and he already knew what I was ordering. Full 10% based on preliminary quarterly profit. Though final numbers may adjust slightly post-audit. You'll receive the wire within 3 business days of signature. Greg flipped it open. Eyes scanning fast. Efficient. His eyebrows didn't move, which meant it was real. "And I asked, though I already saw them bulging from the last few pages like tumors. He nodded. "Included. You don't talk to the press. You don't talk to future employers. You don't talk at all." "And David?" I asked, tapping the table slowly. "He goes. Effective immediately. Official reason, breach of internal conduct policy." I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The satisfaction curled low and cold in my gut. Not joy. This wasn't joy. This was vindication distilled to its purest chemical form. The look in Reynolds' eyes wasn't remorse. It was asset protection. Damage controlling cufflinks. I tapped the folder again. 2 conditions, I said. Reynolds didn't blink. "Go on." 1. Frank Eldridge. You're going to cut him a check. Label it consulting fee. You and I both know he deserves 10 times what I'm asking. But you're going to give him $250,000. And it's going to look like a good faith business transaction. Reynolds opened his mouth, then closed it. Done. 2. Maria gets a letter of recommendation. Anonymous source. But glowing. Personally guaranteed by you. No vague phrasing. No HR word salad. Something that gets her hired. "You're protecting your people," he said, voice flatter than Midwest topography. "No," I replied. "I'm punishing yours." Greg coughed softly to cover a laugh. Reynolds stood, adjusting his jacket. "My legal will finalize this by morning. You'll have final signature copies by noon." I stood too. 3 days. 3 days. We shook hands. His grip was dry and firm and utterly soulless. Greg and I walked out of the building like we were leaving a funeral with full pockets. In a way, we were. David's career had just been embalmed in a sealed manila folder. The reputation he'd built on theft and smarm had been reduced to a footnote in a sealed settlement. Outside, the wind bit through my blazer like static. But I felt warm. I hadn't just won. I'd rewritten the ending. And the best part? They paid me to do it. Wire hit at 9:07 a.m. on a Tuesday. I stared at the number so long I forgot how to breathe. 7 figures. Clean. Legal. Untouchable. A sum large enough to make my bank app freeze for a second like it needed to mentally prepare for the responsibility. I didn't cry. I logged into the hospital portal first. Mom's balance, zeroed out. Then the mortgage company, gone. Credit cards. Medical loans. Predatory short-term garbage I took out back when I was buying her prescriptions with a coupon and a prayer, wiped clean like a chalkboard before confession. It didn't feel real until I called her. She picked up on the second ring, already suspicious. "Did you do something illegal?" she asked. "Nope. Just outed a corporation into coughing up their soul." She chuckled. "Well, it's about damn time." We talked while I filled out a wire for Frank's consulting fee. He cried when I told him about it. Said no one had ever stood up for him like that. I told him to buy a new laptop, a real bed, and a six-pack of something overpriced and fermented. Maria, meanwhile, got her letter. Reynolds didn't even try to weasel out of it. The man knew when he was bleeding out. She called me 2 days later. Same Thai restaurant. Same booth. Tears in her eyes and a job offer in hand. They said I was an asset they couldn't afford to miss. "You're right," I said. "Now go pretend you're not smarter than all of them. That's how you get promoted." I should have let it end there. But the truth is, some ghosts need burying in public. So I made one last move. On a quiet Thursday night, I opened a bottle of champagne that cost more than my first car and wrote a review on a certain job site. Not bitter. Not vengeful. Just observant. Be cautious of last-minute restructuring conveniently timed before bonus season. This company rewards loyalty with silence and profits with pink slips. Leadership prioritizes optics over ethics. And creative accounting isn't just tolerated, it's weaponized. No names. No lawsuit bait. But anyone with half a brain and an internet connection would know exactly who I meant. It went viral in a week. Got LinkedIn messages from strangers thanking me for confirming their suspicions. A recruiter even asked if I'd consult on toxic culture remediation. I said I was busy. And I was. Because I was sitting on the deck of a modest sun-washed beach house I bought in cash. Ocean view. No neighbors. Just me, mom on speakerphone, and the distant sound of seagulls fighting over a French fry. She asked what I was drinking. Champagne, I said. The kind you don't chase with Tums. What's the occasion? I swirled the glass, watching the bubbles climb. I read the fine print, I said. Then I used it to choke a giant. And I toasted to every spreadsheet. Every ignored warning. Every smug dismissal that led to this moment. Because some bridges deserve to be burned. And some exits deserve fireworks. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.